good. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. With me is Stephen Brown, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Stephen will make some remarks following mine. I'm also joined by Tim McSorley of the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, and we will all be available, and also by Karen from National Council of Canadian Muslims, and we all will be available to respond to questions. This morning, I tabled in the House of Commons my private member's bill, C-331, an act to amend the Canadian Intelligence Service Act, Duty of Candour. This follows a process of public consultations launched last fall about Canada's national security agencies and how we can build trust in them by increasing transparency and accountability around the duty of candour that CSIS officials owe to the courts. I want to thank everyone who reached out by phone, email, and Zoom, and who attended a town hall to share their experiences. Through these conversations, including town halls in Scarborough, Ottawa, and London in Ontario, and Surrey in BC, I heard a lot of different stories, especially from the racialized Canadians. They spoke of being questioned on their university campuses or outside their places of worship, of lengthy questioning at border crossings, of unexplained surveillance, and of feeling targeted by no other discernible reason than their faith or their ethnicity. They spoke of not being able to trust the motivations of the agents and officers who are sworn to protect them, and all Canadians. I've experienced some of these feelings myself. I want Canadians of all backgrounds to be able to have faith in CSIS, that the organization is looking out for them, holds itself to a high standard of conduct, is subject to strong oversight, and faces consequences when it falls short of its obligations and duty. That trust will be difficult to build, and it will take time, and it must start with transparency. That's what we are seeking to accomplish with this bill. It's not possible to address all the issues that were raised in my consultations with one piece of legislation. But we can make a start, and we can start with more transparency around the duty of candour that CSIS Acts owe to the courts. This bill seeks to amend the CSIS Act in 3 different ways. Number 1, including in the annual classified report by the CSIS Director to the Minister of Public Safety and National Security and Intelligence Review Agency information of the number of breaches of the duty of candour, a brief description of each, and any remedial action taken. Number 2, requiring the same information in an unclassified form be tabled annually in the House by the Minister. And number 3, amending the oath of office sworn by CSIS officials to include the duty of candour owed to the courts. It is my hope that by requiring transparency around breaches of the duty, as well as including it in the oath, it will make clear to both management and the agents that this duty is important. I hope that by requiring public reporting on the remedial action taken in response to breaches, management will take this seriously and take strong action that sends a clear message to both the public and the CSIS agent that there will be real consequences for the lack of candour or misleading the court. And I hope that the public, by seeing the actions taken, will see the agency is committed to doing better and upholding their rights. Now that bill is tabled, I will try to work with my colleagues to get it to the second reading debate. I hope there will be widespread support for advancing this legislation and helping to build public trust in our national security agencies. With that, I will turn it over to Stephen from the NCCM, and then we would be go down. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, MP Zahid, for your remarks. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Brown, and I am the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Now, today marks a turning point in Canadians' collective effort to protect our democracy and the civil liberties that it embodies. For too long, our national security agencies have been allowed to operate with minimal accountability. And this has led to officials and agents in the national security establishment essentially lying in court and to judges to achieve narrow and often questionable operations. These bad decisions have led to the violations of the rights of Canadians. It is an unacceptable pattern that needs to be corrected with sharp action. And that is why we worked with Member of Parliament, Salma Zahid, in partnering to help in the development of her private bill, C-411, which would increase transparency and accountability in our national security space. We have all been aware of years that our national security agencies haven't been transparent with courts or our lawmakers. So when we came to MP Zahid after yet another ruling about CSIS violating its duty of candor, she acted fast to work and to consult with communities across Canada to find a solution. This bill represents that critical work. This is a critical step forward for Canadian democracy and for the protection of Canadian civil liberties. It is a bill that holds security officials accountable while giving the public more access to our agency's track record and operations. National security officials are not above the law. It is time for action, and this bill is the right place to start. Thank you very much. I will now hand it over to our Senior Legal Officer, Karine Devil.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My colleagues and I at the National Council of Canadian Muslims have long been working with members of our community who have an increasing mistrust of the authorities in this country. Chief among these authorities are members of the national security establishment that has targeted Muslim community and counterterrorism operation since 9/11. The duty of candor, as we all know, is essential for the maintenance of the rule of law. Yet, the federal court has loudly noted on more than one occasion that CSIS has withheld information from the court, from judges to get warrants. And to what end? Well, it's to achieve their short-term operational goals. And unfortunately, this is at the expense of often very vulnerable Canadians. These breaches of duty of candor by security agents and officials are disastrous for Canadian democracy. They degrade trust among the public, they tear at our social fabric, and very often lead to terrible results. We all remember the Mahararar incident, in which this Canadian citizen was wrongly accused of terrorism, was sent to Syria, was tortured, and this was based partly on false information provided by the RCMP. And we all know the kind of suffering he endured over there. It is time for to stop this lack of accountability. Member of Parliament, Salma Zahid, has taken the lead to turn words into concrete action. Her bill deserves immediate attention in Parliament by all the elected officials who want to preserve the civil liberties of Canadians. It is a major step forward in a much-needed process for change. We welcome it, and we look forward to working with all those who want to see more transparency and accountability in our national security apparatus. Thank you. I will now leave it to Tim McSorley.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim McSorley. I'm the National Coordinator of the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group. First, I would like to thank MP Zahid and our colleagues at the National Council of Canadian Muslims for being here today and for inviting us to join them at the introduction of this very important piece of legislation. And I would like to thank MP Zahid and her team and staff for the concerted and dedicated work that they've done to address these issues of accountability and transparency with Canada's national security agencies. As my colleagues have said, and as our coalition has documented over the past 20 years, for far too long, national security agencies in Canada, including CSIS and the RCMP, have been able to act with impunity, particularly through multiple findings of misleading the courts. CSIS in particular, through multiple reviews and multiple court findings, has been essentially pulled up on the rug for misleading the courts, for withholding information, and for breaching their duty of candor. And it's integral that something be done to ensure that they can't continue to do this. There was a review by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency that put forward very important policy changes that would have to happen both at the Department of Justice and among CSIS. However, what we've seen time and time again after other court findings, after other review findings, is that CSIS has failed to report on how they've actually acted to implement those policies. And what have we found after the fact is that they actually haven't implemented those policies, that they find it too difficult, that it falls to the wayside. By bringing in this important bill on transparency, what we'll be able to do is fill a gap in order to ensure that when CSIS does not meet the expectations that the courts have put forward and that the review agencies have put forward, that will have to be shared publicly, that there will be able to be more of a discussion. As my colleague said, what we have seen over the years is that national security agencies, because of this secrecy and lack of transparency, have been able to engage in rights violations, whether it's towards Canada's Muslim population, towards individuals abroad, or towards other communities that have been targeted by national security laws. It's time that this needs to be stopped, and we're looking forward to working with MP Zahid and with the National Council of Canadian Muslims and others to make sure that this private member's bill makes it through Parliament and makes some significant change. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Stephen, Karen. We are here if there are any questions.
Sure, if I can ask this to anyone who'd like to comment. Sorry, Rafi Buchanan from CBC. You are presenting this bill in this context of a lot of debate going on about foreign interference into Canadian elections, and a lot of that debate is fed by reports in media outlets based on CSIS documents. Are you concerned at all that your bill will be seen as a distraction because of the larger debate going on?
All of us take these allegations of election interference very seriously, and I'm very confident that the government does well with all the measures that have been previously put in place. I support the work of the Special Rapporteur, and I really look forward to seeing the recommendations from the Rapporteur. As I said, I believe that trust must begin with transparency, and that's what I'm seeking to accomplish with this legislation. So this legislation has a process to go through. It will go through its own process. But at the same time, I really look forward to the recommendations from the Rapporteur.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Yes, please.
So, yes, we do recognize that there's been a lot of talk about what's happening with CSIS right now, especially if people have been watching the news yesterday. So, generally speaking, we are concerned about how CSIS is operating on many fronts. We do want to make sure that the Canadian government continues to support human rights internationally. But for this particular bill, this is something we've been working on for 2 years. So it's not involved or a consequence of what we've been seeing in the media recently. So. Yeah.
I have a follow-up just for MP Zahid specifically. You said in your preamble that you have experienced some feelings of being discriminated against by national security agencies yourself. Can you provide us an example of what you meant by that?
I can give you one example. I'm an immigrant who came to Canada in 1999, and I'm very proud to raise my family here. I'm a mother of 2 young men, now almost 25-year-old and 23-year-old. I have relatives living across the border in Detroit. My husband's sister lives there. So, we have been visiting them quite whenever it is possible, usually on the weekends. So, once we were crossing the border, it was a bit late. We left on a Friday evening. My kids were very young. At that time, both the boys were sitting at the back seat. When we went to the counter, they said, please get on the side and we need to talk to you. So, when we stopped the car and the way the officers came, and my boys had those handheld devices like Pokemon or leave them, like, get out of the car, like, the way they interacted with us, like, even, like, 6-year-old boy said to me, like, they're treating us as if we are criminals. So I think it's really very important that Canadians have trust in their agency. And my bill with this legislation, I want to build that confidence. I know with this legislation, we cannot solve all the issues, which I heard during my consultation, but I think it's a starting point in building confidence for the Canadians. Because the way these interactions happen, I hear a lot from my boys. They tell me that they have seen at the university campuses, both have gone through 2 universities, that how many of the Black Canadians or Muslim Canadians are questioned on campuses. I talked with many people, and they tell me about these stories, how they are questioned outside their places of worship. So I think we need to build that confidence.
Stephen Jeffrey from the Lobby Monitor. I believe that originally the plan was to table this bill back in the fall of last year. Why the I suppose extension? Was there an extended consultation?
This last year, I said that I intend to do that, and we were here, like we did a press conference telling about my intentions, and then we went through public consultation. So I did a series of town halls. I traveled, and we did a lot of Zoom meetings, and I received a lot of emails. So after that, we have come to tabling this legislation.
Thank you. And I just have a follow-up for Mr. Brown. You did mention earlier that this is something you've been working on since 2020 for a couple of years. What will you be doing, I suppose, in the coming months to basically gain support from other MPs to have this legislation at least looked at second reading?
Well, I think it's important to know that this is not something that's only important for the National Council of Canadian Muslims. This is a piece of legislation that's important for millions and millions of Canadians. So what we're going to be doing is encouraging MPs from all parties to speak with their constituencies and understand the gravity of what's happening in Canada right now, and to act in the best interests of our country and our democracy. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Do you remember? You said your son was
Yes,
6.
I think like it was like 2007.
Okay.
Something like
Some-
exactly. I don't remember the
No
date.
worries, I just want
Somewhere.
a rough idea.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
2007.
Got it,
Yeah.
thanks.
Recording stopped.